Here she is. Tastes like a chicken nugget.
Cheers.
It's really good.
Tastes like a burger.
My mind is blown right now. Like the texture is perfect. The juiciness is there. Like it's chicken. It's chicken. The stringiness, it's pulling apart. It totally mimics the real thing. And I would buy this. I would eat this. I'm eating it now. This is a thumbs up from me.
Chicken, 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 and chicken.
This is chicken, but not as we know it.
This chicken, though, is a little bit different. It was grown in a lab.
Cultured meat.
Lab-grown chicken.
A lab-grown chicken nuggets.
Chicken grown in a lab.
U.S. regulators have approved the sale of chicken made from animal cells.
Lab-made animal protein from the company's Good Meat and Upside Foods is now clear for production and sale in the U.S.
Cultured meat, lab-grown meat, clean meat is identical to conventional meat at the cellular level, just grown in a lab. This lab-grown meat is not just a plant-based alternative like the Impossible Burger.
The cultivated meat will be grown in steel tanks using cells from a living animal, fertilized egg, or special band of stored cells.
Without environmental destruction, without diseases, without animal suffering.
We make meat without killing a cow.
You don't have to kill a chicken to eat chicken.
Why are people making it?
Climate change.
It's better for the environment.
The environment.
It seems as though that the mission statement behind all of this is, hey, we're going to give you the taste of meat, but it's better for you and it's better for the planet.
Lab-grown meat just got approved in the US, and it is a giant scam. They say that lab-grown meat is gonna be cleaner, safer, and better for you than regular meat. They say that eating this will save the environment.
We conducted a study, and it shows that there's a risk that cultured meat actually might be worse for the environment in some situations than animal agriculture.
That it will save animals from getting slaughtered.
But the part that seems to be overlooked a lot is that step where they feed the cells the things animals need to grow. And traditionally, they have done that with something called FBS, or fetal bovine serum. It is derived from the blood drawn from a bovine fetus at slaughterhouses. There are literally people who are at slaughterhouses where their job is when a pregnant cow comes in to be slaughtered, they can be there to collect the blood from the unborn cow fetus by sticking a needle into the heart of the fetus after it is removed from their mother.
That it's just as healthy as normal meat. But the reality couldn't be further from the truth.
So you grew this chicken in these tanks behind us.
Yes.
Without ever slaughtering a chicken.
You could ask me that 1,000 times, and the answer is yes, yes, yes.
Lab-grown meat is chock full of antibiotics, cancer cells, and a bunch of other terrible things they don't want you to know about. But why would they tell the truth when there's billions of dollars flowing into this arena?
President Biden signed an executive order this year requiring federal agencies to support cultivating alternative food sources.
And when there's billions upon billions more to be made. So soon, you're going to be hearing more and more about lab-grown meat. These companies are going to be playing every trick in the book to convince you that it's better than the real thing. But just like every other artificial food that has been concocted over the past century, if you fall for it, you're going to end up sicker and more malnourished than ever. Welcome to Evil Food Supply, and this is the great lab-grown meat scam.
We're running out of time. Nature cannot pay that price anymore.
Enough of treating nature like a toilet.
Now, the ultra-wealthy backers of these companies, do you think they're sitting down and eating this lab-grown chicken themselves? No! The super rich don't consume the same slop they push on us, just like they don't put their money in the same things they tell us commoners to. For example, they tell us to just put your money in the S&P 500, while they happily put their money into investments that we don't have access to. And one of those exclusive investments is fine art. See, fine art is very special. It's a market that tends to be less impacted by recent events. Like in 2022, while there was soaring inflation and banking collapses, the art market had its best auction year ever. And this year, the art market has now passed its pre-pandemic highs. This has allowed today's sponsor, Masterworks, the art investing platform, to continue paying out to everyday investors like us. In fact, just days ago, they sold a Kusana piece for a 17.6% net return to investors. Investors that were able to get in on this painting without needing millions of dollars. This puts Masterworks' track record at 14 exits, netting us returns like 10, 13, and even 32%. With a track record like that spanning multiple years, it's no wonder Masterworks offerings can sell out in days, even hours. But you'll get priority access for your new account when you use our link in the video description below. So scroll down and get priority access now by clicking the link below. Lab-grown meat is a food manufacturer's dream. Think about it. Put yourself in the shoes of a big food company like Tyson, for example. Raising chickens is hard. You need a ton of real estate. You gotta feed the chickens. You gotta employ a bunch of laborers to care for the chickens. Oftentimes, you end up accidentally stepping on your chicks and killing your inventory. And of course, you're constantly getting smeared by animal rights activists for animal abuse. Don't worry, our next video is on America's love affair with chicken meat, so make sure you subscribe. But just imagine if you could print succulent chicken breasts on demand in a lab. Your costs would go way down. In fact, your costs would eventually go to near zero. Instead of having to wait 6 to 8 weeks for a chicken to fully mature, you could have chicken meat just like that. And guess what? You will never have to worry about pesky animal abuse accusations ever again. So of course big food giants like Cargill and Tyson are funding lab-grown meat. It would be a dream come true. And if lab-grown meat ends up being completely devoid of nutrients, or if it's maybe even toxic and dangerous to humans, well. Just like seed oils, the food pyramid, and every other artificial food that's come onto the scene over the last century, the masses will blindly buy into it. And no one will realize that they've been duped until decades later. And so, big food conglomerates and investors have thrown a ludicrous amount of money at lab-grown meat companies. Good Meat and Upside Foods, the two companies that just got approved in the US, just got $267 million and $598 million respectively in funding, while Eat Just has gotten $464 million in funding. That's right, these three companies already have well over $1 billion between them, and they're gonna do whatever it takes to get you to shove their artificial meat concoction down your throat. Welcome to the Meat Lab.
Meat in here.
Yes.
But I don't see any animals and I don't see any animal parts.
Well, that's the trick, right? These are the tissue production cultivators. We invented this sort of technology in order to grow tissue.
Is it safe?
Absolutely.
To make a delectable lab-grown meat nugget, you'll need a few very special ingredients. Number 1, growth factors. Things like sugar, amino acids, vitamins, and trace elements to give the meat everything it needs to grow. And you'll of course extract these factors from the cheapest food imaginable, soy.
And so they're going to need things like soybean hydrolysate to provide amino acids. And where do we get soybean hydrolysate from? Well, you get it from soybeans. And how do you get soybeans? Well, you plant these giant monocrops. And what happens when you plant giant monocrops? Well, you decimate the whole ecosystem.
But the problem with soy is that it has more estrogen than any other bean in existence. No, seriously, 1 cup of soybeans has the equivalent amount of estrogen as 20,000 cups of chickpeas. If you don't know, estrogen is to females what testosterone is to males. Estrogen is what makes women, women. But when estrogen levels become too high, especially in males, it can lead to a whole lot of problems like infertility, low testosterone, slow growth, shrinking muscle mass, and weight gain. So yep, let's shove it into our lab-grown meat. And once your delicious soy plasma is complete, you'll need to add in your animal cells. Because remember, the goal here is to grow edible meat from just a few animal cells. But you can't just use any old regular cells from a chicken or a cow or whatever. That's because regular cells from a piece of animal meat, for example, just simply don't grow fast enough. Regular animal cells only multiply a few dozen times. So yeah, you're never gonna get your lab-grown meat factory going with cells like that. You need a type of cell that will grow to infinity super fast. And you want to know what cells multiply super fast? Cancer cells. Think about it. Tumors grow fast and get out of control, which is why cancer is so scary. But that also makes cancer cells the perfect catalyst for lab-grown meat. But obviously you're not gonna call them cancer cells because branding. Hello? Cancer has a bad ring to it. If people knew that the reason you can grow monstrous masses of meat so quickly was because you were using cancer cells, they would chuck their lab-grown meat right into the toilet. So you call them immortalized cells instead. Immortalized cells are defined as either tumorous cells that do not stop dividing or cells that have been artificially manipulated to proliferate indefinitely and can thus be cultured over several generations. These cells are immortal because they multiply infinitely, like a tumor. And immortalized cells sounds much better. And when the media questions you about these immortalized cells, you tell them that, hey, scientists have been using these for decades, it's old technology. And don't worry, cancerous animal cells are completely safe, even though there are actual laws against selling cancerous meat in the US because of how dangerous it is. In an article titled, "Are Things Like Cancerous Tumors Allowed by Meat Inspection?" by Michigan State University, cancerous lesions or tumors are not allowed to enter commerce or the food chain. If laboratory results indicate the presence of cancer within the carcass will be marked, US inspected, and condemned. Once a carcass is condemned, it is denatured and disposed of, so it cannot enter the food chain. But lab-grown meat, you get a free pass. Even though the industry doesn't have the decades of data to prove that cultured meat products won't give you cancer. And when the media comes knocking on your door for answers, you just respond with no comment, avoiding the question entirely. And while your lab-grown meat brews in your bioreactors, you'll need to dump in your final ingredient, antibiotics. Because guess what? This soup of cells does not have an immune system. Unlike a cow that has white blood cells and all the other good stuff to knock out viruses and bacteria, bioreactors are just pure stainless steel. So if you're not careful, your entire batch of lab-grown meat will get overgrown with diseases like Salmonella or E. coli.
These cell cultures don't really have an immune system. There's no surveillance for that. So they have also a high vulnerability to not only these cancer cells, but also to bacterial contamination, viral contamination, fungal contamination. Most likely, you may have to require high levels of antibiotic concentrations to keep these things protected. You know, they want to try to do these in clean rooms, but reality is they're probably going to provide antibiotics, antifungals, antivirus.
So you gotta dump in a ton of antibiotics. And these antibiotics are, you guessed it, gonna go right into your stomach. So now that you have your lab-grown meat ready for consumption, now it's time to guilt trip the masses into buying it. Here's another great benefit to lab-grown meat. It's that just like oat milk and plant-based meat, lab-grown meat gives you the unique ability to tug on people's heartstrings. You can use nifty little marketing phrases like, "You're making the world's kindest beef burger," or "slaughter-free meat," or "helping everyone take a bite out of a better future."
For me, when I get up in the morning, the driving principle for me is why cause any harm if you don't need to?
You'll also be able to shout from the rooftops that your lab-grown meat is way better for the environment than those disgusting farting cows.
What it doesn't have is all the greenhouse gas emissions. What it doesn't have is the elements that lead to increased probabilities of zoonotic disease. What it doesn't have is the, real morality issues that we have with killing 67 billion chickens every single year.
The masses will blindly buy into it, when in reality, the amount of electricity to run your massive mush factory is astronomical. One study found that cultured meat facilities produce more greenhouse gas emissions than traditional animal farms would over a 1,000-year period. And another said that lab-grown meat would produce 4 to 25 times more CO2 than regular cattle farming. We've all been conditioned by big food to think that farms and cattle are horrible for the environment, when in reality, when done correctly, animal farms act as a giant carbon sink that can suck up CO2. They can be carbon negative.
But there was a third-party life cycle analysis, full life cycle, so they looked at the whole process, not just methane emissions from cows burping, but the whole process at White Oak Pastures, which is a beef operation. It's a Savory Institute hub, so they're following the regenerative Savory Institute practices. And they found that their beef operation was a net carbon sink. So again, it actually sequestered carbon from the atmosphere. It was not emitting carbon.
Now, you may be thinking, okay, fine, this lab meat is not as good for the environment as we thought, but at least it doesn't kill animals, right? Well, actually, in that delicious mix of soy-derived amino acids, vitamins, and minerals, is something called fetal bovine serum, also known as the blood of freshly slaughtered cow fetuses. Because if you're gonna grow the best meat possible, you need the best, most powerful blood you can find. And if you're a company like Upside Foods, for example, who still uses this fetal bovine serum in their meat, you'll definitely want to keep that under wraps. And when people start asking questions, you just release articles saying that you developed an animal-free way to grow your meat. You see what we did there? Sure, you developed an animal-free way to grow your meat, but you never said anything about actually using the method you developed. Which is why 2 years later, your website says you're still using the serum. Because you can pretty much do whatever you want behind closed doors. This is an experiment, and the media will always cover your tracks.
This is manufacturing chicken at scale without the animal, without the antibiotics, without all the issues.
This is the meat for people that really enjoy meat. So if you love chicken, if you love beef, this is for you.
And the end product is not plant-based chicken. It's not some different form. It is literally chicken.
It doesn't taste like a better version of chicken or a worse version of chicken. It just tastes like
Tastes like chicken.
Because it is. It has a nutritional composition of chicken because it is. It tastes like chicken because it is. What it doesn't have is all the greenhouse gas emissions.
Do not eat lab-grown meat.
Upside Foods and Good Meat were just given approval by the FDA to sell their steaming lab-grown meat to a restaurant near you. And Eat Just is about to build a giant meat-growing facility right here in the US. So, lab-grown meat is coming, whether you want it or not. But here's the thing. Getting it approved for human consumption is just the first step of their master plan.
The first thing they had to do was get lab-grown meat approved for human consumption. So that they've done. That first step they've done. Number two, what they're going to have to do is go back and make the argument that lab-grown meat is so substantially similar to naturally raised meat that they shouldn't have to label it as lab-grown meat or bioengineered or whatever term they're going to use. So number one, get it approved for humans. Number two, go back and convince them, the government, the agencies, that it's so similar to natural meat that you don't have to label it as lab grown or bioengineered. Number three, the natural meat producers are then going to start labeling theirs as non-lab grown meat or naturally raised or actual meat or whatever term they choose. They'll start using that so that consumers can differentiate and start to, purchase what they want to purchase. So at that point, then the lab-grown meat producers are going to have to go back again and say, look, you already said that, or you agreed that these were substantially similar, that there's not really any noticeable difference between the two. So it's not appropriate for the natural-grown producers to differentiate their product from ours. They're implying it's somehow better. They're implying it's somehow different. We've already had this discussion. You guys have already agreed that it's substantially similar. So therefore, it shouldn't be legal for them to label theirs as being not lab grown or naturally raised or whatever. And they'll make it illegal for the natural producers to differentiate their product with labeling. And then they have what they want, which is a situation where the consumers don't know which one they're getting. They can't choose. Everything's just muddled up together and you buy meat and you take your chances and you hope you're getting what you want.
Some will buy into it. Others will fight back.
Are ranchers like yourself talking about this new cell cultured meat?
As I like to call it, fake meat. As president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, 100% of the places I go, that's what producers want me to talk about.
There's a law that was passed in Missouri, and that law stipulates that in order to call something meat, it has to come from an actual animal. Do you support that law?
I do. There'll be other states that I've been told about that will also make the same attempts to clarify what defines meat. We want to make sure that we have a level playing field on marketing and safety inspection.
Do you see cultivated meat as a threat to the cattle industry?
I see it as a threat if it's mislabeled.
So what should it be labeled?
Cultured meat, lab grown, something that just stands out and lets the consumer know what they're eating.
And the best way for you to fight back is to simply vote with your wallet. The entire big food system has spent decades demonizing red meat as not only terrible for the environment, but that it's also terrible for you. That somehow red meat is now magically a carcinogenic, when we've been eating it for at least 2.6 million years. When in reality, beef in particular is one of the most nutrient-dense foods out there. But all the fake food they're advertising to your kids on television? No, those things are fine. We're gonna expose the systematic demonization of meat in a future video because the story is insane. So make sure you click subscribe. But when it comes to beef, don't buy into their propaganda. Stick to grass-fed. And when it comes to eggs, eggs are also extremely nutrient-dense. But there are a ton of different labels out there to choose from. Organic, cage-free, free-range, pasture-range, non-GMO, no added hormones. So which one do you pick? Well, we go over exactly what all these labels mean and the gold standard to eat in our latest newsletter that you can get for free by scrolling down and clicking the link below. It takes less than 15 seconds. The Evil Food Insiders newsletter is where we get to alert you on breaking news when it comes to our food supply straight into your inbox, along with important knowledge like this that might not warrant a full documentary. For example, Evil Food Insiders were the first to learn about lab-grown meat a few weeks back, before we were able to make this documentary on it. The feedback we've been getting on this newsletter has been way better than we expected. And you can be a part of it by clicking the square on the screen or with the link below and simply typing in your email.